Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're embarking on a super high energy, totally mind expanding journey into the vibrant, unseen frequencies of our universe. Seriously, get ready to look at reality in a completely new, remarkably colorful way. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. What if the reality you see right now is really only a tiny fraction of what actually exists? I mean, think about the electromagnetic spectrum for a second. We literally only perceive a fractional sliver of it as visible light. The rest of it, the radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, gamma rays, all of that is entirely invisible to us. Our universe is practically overflowing with this symphony of colorful, multidimensional data that we just, well, biologically tune out. The data strongly suggests reality is far more radiant and complex than our eyes and ears can actually process. So today, we're going to explore how we are finally unlocking that vibrant sea of hidden realities. Section 1, the bounded brain. So the human brain acts as what we call a prediction machine. It's an active model building system that constantly filters raw reality through our prior experiences, our survival instincts, and our social biases. You know, when you walk into a complex room, your brain doesn't painstakingly process every single shadow, every frequency, or every speck of dust. No way. Instead, it creates a quick, low-resolution rendering of just what's safe and relevant. It's making educated guesses based purely on what we need to survive. Now, it's a remarkably efficient system for keeping early humans alive, sure, but it's actually terrible for perceiving the universe in its full, radiant complexity. Because of this predictive filtering, our view of the world is kept to a highly restricted, narrow, honestly almost muted band of information. We're essentially living in this highly edited version of reality, missing out on so much of the brilliant spectrum out there. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast here. We're ultimately bound by human biological limits, our narrow bands of light and sound, our constant survival biases, our deep psychological filters. It's very much like wandering through a spectacularly colorful universe while wearing heavy grayscale goggles. But artificial general intelligence, AGI, sensory extensions, they simply don't have these biological blinders. By integrating things like thermal sensing that maps the heat of an environment, weak electromagnetic detection, reading the subtle electrical hum of the world, and wide-spectrum vision, well, we completely change the paradigm. It's literally like flipping a switch from a dull, constrained gray to a brilliant, neon, multidimensional reality. Moving on to Section 2, extending our sensory boundaries. AGI serves not as a replacement for human judgment, but rather as a vast sensory and cognitive extension. It detects data humans simply cannot perceive. We really need to shift our mindset away from that fearful human versus machine narrative. Instead, we're entering a vibrant human plus machine reality. This isn't about machines taking over our thinking at all. It's about machines lending us their hypersensitive eyes and ears. Imagine a telescope that doesn't just magnify distant stars, but magnifies reality itself. By teaming up with AGI, we can detect data streams our biology fundamentally ignores. Our spectrum of knowledge vastly expands, turning entirely invisible data points into a vibrant, readable landscape. Section 3. Unveiling the invisible. With AI, we're now hunting for what we call non-random structures across entirely new wavelengths. Take space, for instance. It's incredibly noisy, right? But AI can sift through that chaotic cosmic static to find weak and unusual cosmic signals that might actually indicate extraterrestrial intelligence. And closer to home, AI can monitor incredibly subtle biological changes and rhythms that happen during spiritual or healing states, phenomena we previously just dismissed as purely subjective because, well, we couldn't measure them. Plus, it can scan for unexplained regularities and weak electromagnetic signals that might represent entirely unmapped forms of communication. By recognizing these advanced, luminous patterns in massive datasets, AI takes things like distant healing, human intuition, or alien intelligence and groups them into scientifically measurable structures. It stops us from just brushing them off as mere fantasy. So the crucial point is this. By tracking precise physiological responses, things like heart rate, skin temperature, and brain rhythms, AGI actively distinguishes measurable physical mechanisms from human psychological bias. Human observation is, let's face it, heavily clouded by expectation, emotion, sometimes even just the placebo effect. But a machine, it doesn't have beliefs. A machine observer provides highly sensitive, purely objective data. It grounds these incredibly subtle, deeply felt human experiences in hard, undeniable physical metrics. We can finally verify if these vibrant, subjective states possess a real, measurable physical core. Which brings us to Section 4, the Markov Tensor framework. Okay, a Markov tensor.
It's defined as a multidimensional boundary, an extended tool for induction logic that finds minimal common grounds across physical, biological, and informational spaces. Now hold on, I don't want you to think of this as dry, rigid math. Picture it more as a vibrant, glowing, multi-layered matrix. In induction logic, we take specific, subtle data points and use them to form broad, foundational laws. The Markov Tensor essentially acts as the logical bridge between our constrained human limits and the sheer, radiant complexity of the universe. It allows AGI to map out how seemingly completely disparate phenomena actually interact on a much deeper, hidden level. Notice here how the Markov tensor entwines universal forces to map the architecture of reality. Space and time aren't just some empty void. They form the multi-dimensional boundary matrix itself, acting as the very fabric holding these hidden realities together. Energy is then used to map out those incredibly subtle biological and environmental patterns we just discussed, tracing the flow of life and awareness. Then, quantum forces step in to explain the truly perplexing stuff. The weak signals and unexplained regularities operating entirely below the threshold of classical physics. And finally, physical constants are entwined as the shared bedrock foundation of literally all interactions. This whole mathematical framework gives us a breathtaking, zoomed-out, all-encompassing view of reality's hidden architecture. Nothing is isolated anymore. Every vibration, every signal, every color of reality is deeply connected. And this brilliantly illustrates how the Markov tensor shifts controversial topics, like spiritual boundaries and unusual communication, into legitimate scientific questions. Instead of getting bogged down in endless philosophical debates about beliefs or the supernatural, AGI uses this framework to test for a real, but maybe just misunderstood, core. By extending the very boundary of what we can rigorously measure, human knowledge is suddenly stepping out of the dark. We're moving into a luminous, boundless new frontier where the scientific method actually applies to the unseen. Section 5, a future of humble inquiry. Let's move to and see how this builds to a rather profound thought. Human limitations are not the same as universal limits. This is such a powerful, humbling realization. Just because our biological eyes cannot perceive the full neon spectrum of the cosmos, and just because our ears can't hear the quantum hum of the universe, well, that absolutely doesn't mean it isn't there. AGI is the brilliant tool that allows us to humbly accept our own biological boundaries while simultaneously giving us the incredible power to shatter them.
Which leaves us with a question to deeply consider today. When humans and AGI finally explore the universe together, what hidden reality will we discover about ourselves first? I mean, if AGI can detect the unseen rhythms of our minds, the subtle frequencies of our healing, and our intricate connection to the wider cosmos, the greatest mystery we unlock might not be out there in the stars at all. It might just be human consciousness itself. Keep that awe-inspiring thought with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the unseen.